Hi everyone, this is Chris Moralia from Transformative EdTech and T4 EdTech Consulting. And today we are going to be doing some mashing, some map mashing if you want to use that word. We're going to be focusing on history skills and we're going to be using Pear Deck and the Eduprotocols. So we're going to be exploring primary and secondary sources with Pear Deck and Eduprotocols, doing some app mashing and Eduprotocol matching at the same time. The goal is for students to create a collaborative summary, and that summary is actually going to be done with the Sketch and Tell Eduprotocol. And then we want to focus on what primary and secondary sources are. So we want to make sure that students understand the context. In order to study history, we need to understand the difference between a primary and secondary source, as students are exposed to images, pictures, text from textbooks, and text from primary source documents. And so we're going to be doing this together. It's a partner assignment. So one person is going to be investigating primary sources, and the other one will be investigating secondary sources. And with the focus on creating a difference between both the primary and secondary sources by creating a sketch and tell from the Eduprotocols. So as you can tell, I'm a big fan of the Eduprotocols, and when students are studying these primary and secondary sources, we want to make sure that they develop mastery. So we're going to start off with a Fast and Curious, and we are going to do a quizzes. So what students would do is they'd simply click on this link. The link is going to take them to a quizzes. Now this is something that they would do in the class meetings all throughout the week because we want them to develop mastery. So they'd start off and they have these various questions. They would be, the questions are related to primary and secondary sources and history skills. So you can see what they would be doing with their quizzes. Now, after the class is finished on the quizzes, then we want to actually start the exploration where you would have the students paired up. One student is going, and the pair is going to be looking at primary sources, and the other one is going to be looking at secondary sources. And these are created on a Pear Deck. So let's take a look at the primary sources. So they'd open it up. Now you don't have to use Pear Deck for this. You could simply hyperlink your slides together. But with Pear Deck, it becomes much more interactive. Now, one of the things I'd want to make sure that occurs is that the students are front-loaded so they understand the difference between a primary and secondary source, because the rest of the presentation is going to be based upon application. So after they've watched this video, I would expect they would take the quiz here, and they should be able to determine what are the differences between primary and secondary sources. Now, notice with Pear Deck, what I've done is I've mixed up the type of assessment. So they have writing assessment, they have a multiple choice assessment, they are going to do a matching assessment, and then they have to explain. So we've scaffolded going from easier to hard, because now they have to explain why one of these is a primary source and the other one is not. Now, once again, utilizing the Pear Deck slide, I've now used the Frayer model. So I'd want a definition of a primary source. I'd want the basic characteristics of the primary source. I'd want the students to provide their own example of a primary source and then give a non-example of the primary source. So this would be the student that's focusing on the primary source. And once they're done, they would return back to the main slide deck. The second student was going to be looking at secondary sources. And once again, I've done this on a Pear Deck. It doesn't have to be done on a Pear Deck, but it becomes a lot more interactive. So they are also watching a video. and they are going to be determining what is a secondary source. As you can see, the various different types of answers, they go from a multiple choice to answering and explaining, and looking at another form of secondary sources again. And then they too would have to do a Frayer model as well. So once again, providing a definition, characteristics, they want to provide their own example of a secondary source and give a non-example. And when they're done, they would go back to the main slide deck. So here we are, we're doing a formative assessment, and this is with Sketch and Tell. So they're going to be focusing on the primary and secondary sources, and they would use the Google tools and or icons that have been provided on the slide, which you can't see here, but the icons would be provided on the slide. And one student is going to be doing the sketching and the other student is going to be doing the telling. So they have to talk to each other and talk about, so what are the differences between primary and secondary sources? And then they have to sketch it out the best they can, and one of the students can be telling it. And there you have it, a formative assessment using Pear Deck, Google Slides, and the Eduprotocols, with using Sketch and Tell, the Fast and Curious, and the Frayer Model.